Ladies and gentlemen, here are our today's topic. Moscow under drone fire. The Russian capital is hit by the largest raid since the beginning of the war, and the Kremlin promises a massive retaliation. Kharkiv in Crimea, new target in the military escalation, bringing a chain of destruction and attacks. Aftermath of Moscow raid, panic, destruction, and threat of reprisal leave the population living in permanent fear. Trump-Iran agreement, a disputed deal judged too favorable to Tehran, sparks sharp criticism on the international stage. DRC Ebola claims more than 2,200 lives as global alarm grows. Treatment centers are overwhelmed and WHO rings the alarm. 2026 World Cup, the DRC Leopards secure a historical point against Portugal, a symbolic victory for an entire nation. Moscow under drone fire, the Russian retaliation intensifies. We open this podcast with Moscow, which has been hit by a largest Ukrainian drone raid since the start of the war. Image of black smoke rising over the Russian capital have circled the world.
Moscow, the Russian capital, hit by hundreds of Ukrainian drones. Explosion echoed through several neighborhoods, causing fires and shutting down airports. The Kharkiv refinery, crucial for fuel supply, was severely damaged. In response, the Kremlin announced an unprecedented retaliation, coordinated regular strikes against Ukrainian logistic supply. This escalation foreshadows even darker days ahead for civilians trapped in this war.
Kharkiv et Crimée, nouvelle cible dans l'escalation. New anchor, le prolongement following this attack. Kharkiv and Crimea have become the new target of the military escalation. Russia and Ukrainian threats are multiplying, leaving destruction and chaos.
And each response fuels future escalation. The cycle of violence seems endless, and the civilian population pays the heaviest price.
Aftermath of the Moscow raid, panic, destruction, and threat of reprisal. Returning to Moscow, where the drone raid caused a wave of panic, shocked residents filmed the explosion from the windows.
The largest drone raid ever launched against Moscow has left indelible markers. Refineries in flames, cancelled flyers, and terrified residents filming explosions from their windows. Images of black smoke over the Russian capital have traveled around the world. The Kremlin promises a massive retaliation while Kyiv claims its right to strike deep inside enemy territory. President Zelensky declared, "If Ukraine burns, Moscow will burn too." A defiant message illustrating the logic of deterrence through retaliation. But behind the speech, it is the civilians who now live in permanent fear of sirens and bombing.
As of June 2026, data shows an intensification of streak between Russia and Ukraine. More than 83,000 violent events recorded since 2022, including nearly 36,500 airstrike or drone strike. Ukraine doubled its pace of drone attack in 2026, shifting to about 4 targets per night, with swarms of 100 to 200 drones. Intensification of Ukrainian streak in 2026. January to March 2026, Ukraine launched 110 long-range drone attacks against Russian targets, energy infrastructure, ammunition depot, military factories. Current pace about 4 targets attacked each night, with swarms of 100 to 200 drones. Comparison: in December 2025, the record was 57 attacks in a single month. In 2026, this pace has doubled. Intensification of Russia's streak. January 26, Russia conducted massive missile and drone strike on Kiev, causing electricity and heating outage for thousands buildings. Here are the global Russia vs. Ukraine statistics as of June 20, 2026, based on data compiled by international observers and organizations such as UN and ARCLED Armed Conflict Location Event Data Project. Trump-Iran agreement, a disputed deal under high pressure. On the diplomatic front, the agreement signed by Donald Trump with Iran is already drawing sharp criticism. Presented as a major breakthrough, opponent view it is far too favorable to Tehran.
In Washington, the agreement signed by Donald Trump with Iran is already sparking controversy. Intended to ease regional tensions, it offers Tehran the lifting of economic sanctions and the reopening the Strait of Hormuz, vital for the global oil trade. However, Israel and several allies denounce the text as too favorable to Iran, which retains part of its civilian nuclear capabilities. Financial markets reacted positively with a drop in oil prices, but politically, Trump is under heavy pressure. This deal, meant to be a diplomatic victory, could well become a strategic burden for the United States.
DRC Ebola claimed more than 200 lives. Global alarm grows. In Democratic Republic of Congo, the Ebola epidemic continues to worsen. More than 200 deaths have already been recorded, and health authorities, supported by the WHO are ringing the alarm.
In North Kivu, the Ebola epidemic is spreading rapidly. The 9 treatment centers are completely saturated with nearly 500 beds already occupied. Medical teams work day and night to isolate patients, but new infections multiply daily. Remote villages are particularly vulnerable due to a lack of access to health care and awareness campaigns. The World Health Organization estimates the crisis could last more than a year if not contained. The Red Cross calls it a major humanitarian emergency, with risk of spreading to neighboring countries. Residents live in constant fear amid quarantines, travel restrictions, and rumors that complicate the fight against the viruses. Faced with this situation, the international community calls for renforced medical and logistical aid. But on the ground, healthcare workers and families face the daily reality of a deadly disease that strikes indiscriminately and leaves grieved villages behind.
2026 World Cup, the Leopards secure an historical point against Portugal. And despite this health crisis, a glimmer of hope for the DRC. On the pitch of 2026 World Cup, the Leopards pulled off a surprise against Portugal.
The DRC Leopards secured their very first World Cup point following a heroic draw against Portugal.